What that means is the children are in temporary custody of the state. That is the 1-year period when parents are trying to get their act together. The entire time that parents are trying to get their act together, the kids are in temporary management conservatorship. So this timeline we're going to look at is for only temporary managing conservatorship cases. Okay? So am I freezing y'all out? Because I'm very comfortable. And it's all about me. All right. So you can see day 1 is the original petition and the ex parte hearing, where there is a mandatory appointment of the AAL, which is the attorney ad litem, and the GAL, which is the guardian ad litem. You guys are guardian ad litem. Okay? So I would love to say in all the counties, parents get appointed. Now the child gets the attorney ad litem. That's the attorney for the child. And we'll have Kathy Klein here a little bit later today to talk about that and what that role is. The guardian ad litem, before there was a CASA program, the attorney played both roles and got paid for both roles. Okay? Now that there's a CASA program here, we do it for free. Okay? And some counties, not all counties, give us money to do that at a much lower rate than what they would pay attorneys. But not all counties have decided to do that yet. We're working on it. Okay? At day 14, you see the adversarial hearing. It's really adversary. If you are taking a case and we call you soon enough, we know about it soon enough, we're going to ask you if you can attend that adversary hearing. It's where, like I said, a mini trial. You'll get to meet the parents, the caseworkers, everybody right at the beginning. You'll also, with early family engagement, have that early family engagement volunteer pass the case off to you. So you'll have a court report to work from. You'll have a volunteer who'll be giving you up to speed, and then you'll take the case. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. At day 60, we have the status hearing, which is the review of the service plan. Children get a service plan also. So they'll be going to therapy, it's generally doctors, dentists, that kind of thing. Maybe they need special education, all that kind of stuff. Parents, again, get that service plan, drug testing, drug treatment, mental health evaluation, those kinds of things. At day 180, we see the initial permanency hearing. Now, I'm going to talk about it. As I said, CPS couldn't be here today, so I'm going to talk about permanency reviews and permanency conferences. But this is where they review the plan for the child. Are we going to go home? Are we going to go with a relative? Are we going to look at adoption? What are we doing? Okay? Are we going to stick with the plan, or are we going to change the plan? CPS works 2 goals at the same time, a primary goal and a concurrent goal. And that's so the primary goal is almost always family reunification. If we discover but then we work a concurrent goal of placement with a relative. So if mom and dad fall off the face of the earth at month 3, we've already been working at finding them a relative. Okay. Permanency hearing is at day 300 and at day 360, but I'll be real honest, it's a little bit before that. We don't want to hit day 360 or 365. There will be a dismissal, an extension, or a trial. Not very many cases go to trial, but it may happen. Okay, that's when you'll be sitting in the little witness box, which is actually just a chair. It's not at all what you think on television at all. Do not watch Law and Order and think you will be cross-examined in the same way. That's what people are nervous about. Court, now trials are more formal, but the court you'll be testifying in, the child protection court, pretty relaxed. You want to talk about that a little bit, Linda? What's it like in Brazos County Court?
In Brazos County, it can get fairly intense.
Okay, that wasn't what you were supposed to say.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. I thought you meant Bell County. In Bell County, it got pretty intense. In Brazos County, I must say, quite a bit more relaxed.
Relaxed.
Quite a bit more. But
okay.
Bell County is
yeah. Now, does it get intense? Yes. Not all the time. but we are not here to make friends. And the judge will tell you he's not here to be a friend. And so we may be disagreeing with the attorneys, with CPS, but remember, you are going to have more information than anybody in the room. Absolutely. That attorney ad litem, if they're really busy and the child is in a good placement, they're going to be relying on you for information. Some attorney ad litems never even go visit their kids, and they're required to. So you are, without a doubt, the most informed person in the room. And so we may not agree with everybody, and that's okay, because we've got all the information. Okay? Questions about timelines of a TMC case? Yeah.
So you said that children also get a service plan. What if they don't like what to do?
That's okay. Yeah, it doesn't hold, we don't hold it against them. CPS is going to push them pretty hard. We're going to want them to be going to therapy and doing the things they're supposed to do. In general, it's not a problem. Yeah.
So on what day are we assigned the case? Like, are we already assigned the case at day one and we go to that?
Now, CASA is assigned. Sometimes we're going to try to assign a volunteer at day 14 or whenever the adversary is. But sometimes it doesn't happen until 30 days, sometimes even 60 days. And right now it's been because we're low on volunteers.
Say, Vincent, it has to go to court. Do the child ever, stand to testify?
Rarely. And our judge, most of our judges, child has a right to be in court. The judge doesn't really like it because you're talking about things that kids don't really need to hear. In general, what the judge will do is meet with the child separately and excuse them from court when we start having the hearing. But they can participate by phone also, if they'd like to. And the older kids want to, and they have the right to be there. Oh, coffee's done. All right. All right. Oh, let me see, make sure. Okay, I was just making sure I wasn't off. Okay, so everybody knows what TMC, Temporary Managing Conservatorship. There's also something called PMC, which is Permanent Managing Conservatorship. It's just what it sounds like, permanent foster care. This is when children are now available for adoption, placement with a relative for adoption. Permanent managing conservatorship is what we don't want to see. This is when kids linger in foster care. Yes?
So does that mean that parental rights have been terminated?
Yes. Parental rights, at the point the child goes into PMC, parental rights have been relinquished or terminated. You can relinquish your rights.
Right.
And there's some benefits to that, but it's sort of the same thing. It just means the judge didn't decide. You decided. Okay. I'm going to show you a little video on PMC.
PMC. It stands for Permanent Managing Conservatorship. But what does that mean? What does it mean for you? And most importantly, what does it mean for a child? A child is designated under PMC when the state of Texas becomes their legal guardian. They enter PMC after 12 months of Temporary Managing Conservatorship, or TMC. During TMC, there are hearings, visitations, and needs assessments. In these early stages, there tends to be a sense of urgency in finding permanency for the TMC child. Too often, when a child moves from TMC to PMC, this urgency is lost. PMC children and youth live in foster care a long time, often moving from place to place. Each time they move, it is processed by their brain as trauma. And when paired with the abuse and neglect they may have experienced, they become at greater risk for struggle in their lives. Many PMC children eventually age out of care without a permanent network of support. This is linked to increased likelihood of incarceration, young parenting, mental health diagnoses, unemployment, isolation, and homelessness. So what can a CASA volunteer do to help children and youth in PMC? They can look at the child's case file in its entirety to help build a story regarding that child's history. Everyone deserves to know their story. They can find, create, and support naturally occurring connections with relatives, kin, or other people who have been part of the child's life. These connections can then become involved as a support or even offer permanency, the ultimate goal for all children in PMC. A CASA volunteer can be a liaison to caregivers, school personnel, doctors, and other professionals involved to make sure the child's needs are being met. And they can spend time listening to, talking with, and supporting a child who really needs them. CASA volunteers can be a lifeline for PMC children and youth. By focusing with urgency on finding permanency and building a network of support that lasts far beyond when our involvement ends, we can work towards a positive future for all Texas children.
Okay, so that was a lot of information, wasn't it? How many times did they say urgency and permanency? So, the child that is in permanent, oh, hold on. I gotta get out of this. Stop it. All right. Now I never, oh my goodness, I always forget that it,
Give me a chance while I'm in class.
yes. Okay. So, when a child is in permanent managing conservatorship, they're either waiting for adoption. That could be a 6-month waiting period when foster parents want to adopt or relatives want to adopt. The child has to be in their home for 6 months, and there's monitoring during that period. Sometimes kids are in their adoptive placements when they go into PMC. Some kids are in a foster home like these kids, and they're just waiting. Some kids wait a long time, and some children are not ever going to be adopted. Over the age of 8, it's unlikely that they'll be adopted from foster care. Everybody wants little babies and young kids. They don't want to adopt a teenager. And sometimes I hear caseworkers and other people say, well, they don't want to be adopted. I don't really believe that. And I do the, and Joyce always helps, and she's about to do it. We do Wednesday's Child with KBTX. Have any of you seen it? Yeah. And so we do a lot of teenagers, and those kids want families. When you start asking those questions, they want those connections, they want families. Yes, sir.
How many children do we have that's under the state?
Oh gosh, that's such a good question. I'm so glad you said that. You want to know why? Because I don't know the answer. And I forgot to tell you guys about the parking lot over here. So if I don't know the answer to a question and I got to find out, put it in the parking lot so I won't forget.
Okay.
And if you have a question, maybe today you have a question about domestic violence or drug abuse, well, we're going to talk about that later, so put your question in the parking lot. Does that make sense? Okay. So somebody write that down and stick it in the parking lot, because I'm going to forget. How many kids are in state custody? That's a great question. Kathy, will you write it? Oh, this is Kathy Lord Jones, one of our advocate supervisors. If you'll write it and put it on that's a great question. It's about, I want to say 30 in Texas. Nationally, Joyce knows the answer, but in Texas I want to say 17,000, but I'll find the number for sure. Okay. Oh, somebody's walking upstairs. All right, so what to expect on a permanent managing conservatorship case? It's long term. We had a boy that came into foster care when he was 8, aged out at the age of 18. He had one CASA volunteer the whole time. Now, I'm not asking for a 10-year commitment, but you need to understand that cases go into PMC and they can last a long time. You're going to have to do the same things on a PMC case that you're asked to do on a TMC case. And we're going to talk about minimum expectations in a minute. When kids go into permanent managing conservatorship, there are only 2 hearings a year. So you saw that list of all the hearings that go on during the first 12 months. Once kids enter PMC, they go every 6 months. So that's not a lot of urgency. Our job is to be the squeaky wheel. These kids need the most attention. And so one of the big parts is family finding. There is now and I'm not sure we'll get into it during training, but there's now a program, a collaboration between Child Protective Services and CASA called Collaborative Family Engagement. It's just what it sounds like. We have meetings where we have the child, anybody the child is supported by, the caseworker, CASA. We all get together and we make a connections map. So we had a girl, I went to one of these meetings just recently, it's a new initiative. And Joyce is the coordinator for that because she is our PMC advocacy supervisor. So if your case goes into PMC, then Joyce will be your advocate supervisor. If you're in the counties, except for Burleson, Kathy would be your supervisor. And she's really good at it.
Welcome to the outer counties.
And you were just in the Leon County Jail, so you know all the tricks out there. And they let her out. So. Which was almost didn't happen, right?
Right? Hello.
They left her in there and forgot about her. So we do a lot of family finding when you're on a PMC case. We really shake the tree and see who's going to come out. So we were in there for this young woman, and she had listed who she felt was a connection. Now she had her dad on that list. She can put anybody she wants on that list. She had her dad and her uncle. Neither one is safe or appropriate, but she gets to put them on the list. And then her sister was there, her sister who aged out, who cannot take her as permanent placement because she's a young college student, doesn't have the resources, can't do it. Her sister was there, her caseworker, her CASA volunteer, and the caseworker supervisor. When we got done with that circle with connections, there were 18 people on it. You know, before we did that, we thought she has a sister. You know, her sister is her only support. So this collaborative family engagement is fantastic. We have family finding tools for you like Ancestry.com, white pages, which let me tell you, nothing is private, nothing. White pages, and then a database called TLO. Not only will white pages tell me who was living with you last year, it'll give me all their phone numbers and their current address. Current phone numbers. It's scary. Cell phone numbers. So don't do anything wrong. We'll find out about it. And if you think your ex-boyfriend or girlfriend isn't going to find you, just hope to God they don't have a white pages account. And so your advocacy on a permanent managing conservatorship case is going to look a little different than your temporary managing conservatorship. Usually, we need volunteers more on TMC cases, but we do have cases that go to PMC where we need a new volunteer. Any questions about that? It's kind of, y'all are getting a lot of information at once, so we'll go over it again. Not necessarily this part, but so pay attention. There are 3 legal outcomes. If the parents' rights have been terminated, like what we were talking about, then the child could be adopted. Sometimes the child goes back to a parent or relative if a different circumstance has been proven. Do you know of any cases like that we've had, Kathy? Or I haven't either. I haven't heard of that. Now, I've heard of it, like we were talking about Dewan. He was about to age out, so we connected him with his mom, but it didn't work out. Okay? And then, or the child may remain in foster care until they're 18. So those are the legal outcomes.
So when a parent surrenders their rights,
That's
is that
it.
like permanent, like they can never, okay.
Right. It's lawyers call it death penalty for parents. They literally have no rights to their child. But one of the things we can do, if it's been 5 years, 6 years, 10 years, we can go back through our database and other things and find, maybe mom was 17 or 16 or whatever when she had that kid, the kid got removed. Let's talk to her now. Maybe she's in a better place. Who didn't change from the time they were 17 to 27, right? And so we can go back and look at mom or other relatives. So the family finding is huge. Yeah. Anybody? Questions? Okay. Let's talk about what your powers and duties are as a guardian ad litem. You are not a party to the suit. What that means is we are not a legal party to the legal case that's going on, which means we don't have a dog in the fight, right? All we're doing is making recommendations to the best interest of the child. So that's the first thing. The second thing, you're right, under the Texas Family Code is to obtain and review copies of the child's medical, psychological, and school records. We have a court order appointing us guardian ad litem that will give us access to all of those things. I love this. It says the guardian ad litem will interview the child and each individual that the guardian ad litem considers to have significant information. That's pretty wide-ranging, right? Basically, you can interview anybody you think has information about the child. You also are entitled to all the legal documents. Okay? Oops, went the wrong way. It also says in the Family Code that you cannot be held liable for civil damages unless your recommendations were made in bad faith, or were consciously indifferent or made with reckless disregard. We're not going to, or they were grossly negligent. That's why you have an advocate supervisor. That's why you have a program director. That's why it all works together. When you stand up in court, you're not making Linda's recommendation. You're making a Voices for Children recommendation. So hopefully that takes a little weight off your shoulders. We all have to agree on it. We're going to make an agency recommendation so it doesn't fall on you, and if somebody sues, you're not held liable anyway, because we're not going to let you make a negligent recommendation. Okay? Questions about your duties? Oh, we talked about immunity. All right, let's talk about an effective advocate. Anybody need a break? Want to get up, move around? We've been talking for a long time. No? Okay. Shucks. I'm just kidding. All right, what do you think, what attributes do you think an effective advocate has to have? What kind of things would you want in an effective advocate?
Being able to communicate
Oh.
with the individual and the people you have to visit with.
Okay, so communicating, effective communicator. Got to find one that works here.
And sometimes certain issues may be a little confidential when you're visiting with those folks.
Okay, so being able to keep confidentiality, very good. And I heard sympathy.
Yes.
I'm a terrible speller, so just bear with me.
Observant.
Oh, very good.
Persistent.
Oh, I love that.
Consistent.
Very good. Persistent, consistent.
Timely.
Oh, I love that one. Do you like that one, Kathy?
I really like that one. Thank you.
What else?
Meticulous.
Oh, now I really don't know how to spell that. Well, we'll go with that. Meticulous, very good. Those are all, and I heard somebody say sympathy. I'm also going to put empathy. What's the difference?
Feeling bad for somebody and then feeling what they're actually feeling.
Right, being able to say, I know I can't say I understand how you feel if I've never been removed from the home, right? But I can say, boy, you're really feeling a lot of hurt and anger. I can say that. Okay. What else do we want? I think you guys have hit it on the head there. I think I have a little list right here. So we'll see if we got everything on the list. What we really want is an advocate that's got one goal. Advocating for the child to be in a safe, stable, permanent placement as quickly as possible. So that's our goal. We want you to be able to work within the parameters of state and federal laws, which is why we're going to talk about it, and conduct an independent investigation. And we're going to talk about independent in just a minute. So, professionalism, I think you guys hit on that. Resourcefulness, right? I think that's one we didn't have. Critical thinking. And I was really happy that everybody we talked to in here has experience with critical thinking, demonstrated that. Cultural sensitivity, understanding of differences, very patient, very tolerant. I told most of you, one of my favorite CASAs said this was the single most rewarding thing he's ever done and the single most frustrating. So you are going to be dealing with a very broken system. And so it can get pretty frustrating sometimes. Anything else you want to add about an effective advocate?
Being able to work with anyone,
No matter what.
culture, anything.
Great. That's right. And so I'm not going to ask you to change your values, but I am going to say let's put those to the side right now and meet people where they are. Very good. Okay, let me. All right, good. We talked about that. Okay, let's talk about an independent investigation. We could get all of our information from Child Protective Services if we wanted to, because they have access to all this information, but that wouldn't be very good. That wouldn't make us unbiased, wouldn't give us all the information we needed. So the CASA, get to use the pointer. CASA works with the child, the teachers, the child's family. That can be biological parents, aunts, uncles, cousins, Child Protective Service workers, all the service providers. That's going to be like anger management, parenting classes, drug treatment, those kinds of providers of service, foster parents, and therapists. So we're gathering information from all of these sources. As we gather all that information, that's how we make our recommendations to the court. So one of the things, and actually Sarah is going to be teaching us about interviewing skills. You're a professor of communication, is that right? So
A lecturer, yes.
A lecturer, excuse me, but communication skills nonetheless, interviewing skills. Okay. Questions about who we talk to? Yeah.
Like what level of confidentiality are like therapists and doctors is allowed to?
Well, we have a court order that gives us access to all medical records. I'll be real honest, the therapist is only going to tell you what they want to tell you, and quite honestly, if I was going to therapy, I wouldn't want a therapist telling everybody everything anyway. But if the parents are going to the mental retardation authority, they have to sign a consent for us to talk to their therapist, but we have access to things like, have they made their appointments, are they making progress, that kind of thing. But literally, with our court order, it's almost like HIPAA. The Privacy Act doesn't even exist. We have access to just about everything. Now, confidentiality is a whole other, for us, is a whole other ball of wax. We are information gatherers, not information givers. So foster parents may say, hey, how's mom doing? Is she going to parenting class? Or has dad gotten his drug habit under control? We don't give out that kind of information. Okay. What happened? Why were those kids removed? You know, that kind of thing. Questions about the independent investigation? Okay. Yeah.
Basically, most thing in independent investigation is, sometimes it's old cliche, you hear two sides of the story, and there's a lot of stuff in the middle, you gotta sift in between all of that.
Absolutely.
The straight of it, that's why those people are pretty tendencies to use. Because they take what they got, what the parents, and what the kids say.
Very good. It's got to
put it together, weed out what you got in your investigation.
Exactly. We got to weed out the BS. We got to trust but verify is pretty much what we say. So if mom says or dad says, hey, I haven't had a dirty drug screen, well, we're going to verify that information. If mom says, I'm going to parenting class and I really love it and I'm learning a lot, and I go and never missed a session, then I'm going to call the parenting class provider and say, mom says she's doing great, and I may hear, oh, absolutely, but I might hear, well, she missed 4 out of the last 5. So it's that trust but verify, absolutely, and sifting through that information, just like you said, to find out what the real picture is.
I worked at a school, Southwood Valley Elementary, for a couple of years, and used to watch the kids and see what them was going, and a lot of parents, when I was going back to the side of the story, a lot of parents, like these kids, their own ADHD medicine and stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of parents wouldn't get it because they would take the stance and, ain't nothing wrong with my child.
Right.
But if the kid's on this medication, he can disturb one kid and that's a whole class.
And the whole foster home up too. Absolutely. All right, so let's talk about best interest, because that's what we're here for, right? So I am going to hand out yet another handout. We'll go over that in a minute. All right, best interest factors. And it's just one-sided. Okay. Thanks, Kathy. I've been sort of just handing them out to the table, so we want to do that. There you go. You might probably have to pass some around. Did you miss out on some? Here you go. Okay. All right. Can I have an extra? Did I give you all enough? All right. Thank you. I'm going to pass out this one as well at the same time. Thank you, ma'am. This phone leg is causing me trouble.
Like some
On the
extras.
leg. Oh, thank you. All right. So identifying best interest, the first thing we want to talk about is the child safe? Okay. Now remember, safety is CPS's job, right? That's their concern almost all the time. I'm just reading off of here. It's not on your page yet.
I'm sorry.
And it's a trick, isn't it, Kathy?
Right?
And we need some over here too, it looks like. Thank you, ma'am. Everybody, this is the second page. But about best interest, we want to look at, is the child safe?
That one, we didn't get that one.
Okay, yeah, that's minimum sufficient level of care, which we'll move into next. So best interest, are they safe? Is their culture being respected? Do they have special needs? So we may be looking at, does the child need special education? Do they need a different type of therapist? Do they need to go see the doctor more often? Are they on too many medications? Are they on not enough medication? Okay? Now this is really important. Is the child's sense of time being honored? And when you were a kid, how long did it take for Christmas to get here? Oh, forever, right? And so if we can give kids 30 days less in foster care, 60 days less in foster care, if we can add some urgency to this case, then we are honoring that child's sense of time. Are they receiving the emotional support and nurturing for healthy brain development? We're going to talk more about that. Are they informed? Is the child informed, and are their views being considered? And are we interrupting, as CASA, are we interrupting their daily living pattern as little as possible? Okay? So up here in the back, it says CASA is not the support system, but ensures that one is in place. That's kind of our little mantra. We can't do it for them. Okay? We have to make sure parents have what they need to be successful. We're out of the case in 12 months. If I'm doing everything for the parents, where are they going to be when I'm gone? Okay, so it's that empowering. So best interest factors, what are they? I'm looking at the handout. You can read these. The best interest factors are what we use to determine their best interest in a legal case. And then jump down a little bit. Well, who advocates for the best interest? A CASA volunteer is the only party that acts for and acts solely on behalf of the child's best interest. And so we want to use these factors. The desires of a child, but remember what you want isn't always in your best interest, right? The emotional and physical needs of the child now and in the future. So if I've got a child that has medical needs, can mom or dad meet these medical needs now and in the future? Okay. We had a situation where we had two parents who were very low functioning. One had a diagnosis of intellectual disability. Father was also low functioning, and then a child with very complicated medical needs. And so they just couldn't take care of that child. Nobody wanted to see that child removed from the home, but it wasn't safe for that child to be there. So nobody was happy that child got removed, or that they gave up their rights to their child and that child was adopted. And nobody was happy about that, but it was about what was best and what was safe for the child. So the emotional and physical danger of one parent to the child now and in the future, parental abilities, are there programs available to assist the parents, the plans for the child by these individuals. So what kind of plans are in place for this kid? Are they going to go to school? Are we going to be able to get them to school? Are we going to be able to get them to the doctor? Those kinds of things. The existing child-parent relationship, remember what I said about, 95, 98% of our kids are really bonded with their family. An excuse for the acts or omissions of a parent. So our parents not taking responsibility for their part in what made this happen. Okay. And then at the bottom it says the preference, child's preference versus best interest. Questions about best interest? Pretty big, but we're going to talk more now about minimum sufficient level of care. That's the second handout you got. This is a bitter pill for a lot of people to swallow. Okay? I will tell you. What you're laughing, Linda? Why is that?
I'm not laughing.
I mean you recognize that. Why is that?
Well, because my own idea of what is appropriate for a child or what is needed for a particular child, especially as you get to know them, can conflict with this.
Mm-hmm. And in what way would you say?
Well, I mean, it not so much on the physical. I mean, the things that are so directly, dangerous to a child. It's more subtle, but it's the things that you can see that are damaging a child. She's talked about how they're some 95%, 98% of kids are bonded even to neglectful or abusive parents, which is really, really tough when they're older, because they're hurting on so many levels. And then one of the big ones, in one case that I knew of, just parents were living in a tent, and this child was just fine with living in the tent in 100+ weather. That's what she sent me back to the tent. I don't want to be here. But on the emotional level, you see parents doing things to their kids or completely just not aware that they're doing it, but it's really obvious that it's causing pain to the child. And yet it doesn't fall within a parameter of taking that child and removing that child right away. And so you're trying to make the parent understand what they're doing. And you'd think that would be pretty obvious or it's not always.
Mm-hmm. And you're hitting it right on the head. Lousy parenting is not neglectful parenting.
Thank you.
We have that issue in this country today.
We do.
With a lot of young people, babies raising babies. If you wasn't able to raise things, you wind up in a situation where you're raising your own family well. If you wasn't taught those things when you were coming up, it's hard to do that.
Right.
That presents a problem sometimes with the kid.
Mm-hmm.
Like this lady who used to work for me, she'd say, I ain't gonna do my kids like that. My mama used to beat me. Well, her son, he's been in trouble all his young life, and he's still in trouble. Because she wouldn't take the stand. Ain't nothing wrong with trying to raise your kids the way you were raised.
Right, and we have a lot of young parents who don't know or were raised in foster care, or were raised in a way that you and I would probably deem inappropriate. Famous case, if you're a football fan, Adrian Peterson beat his child with a switch, right? And it sounded like the first thing he said was, well, that's what my grandmother used to do to me. But what they didn't put in the news was that he had beat the child on his feet and on his testicles. And that's why he was convicted of child abuse and had to pay a fine, and the child lives with his mother. So but there's a difference between my grandmother did that to me and swatted, got me on the behind. I think he really got that kid, And so what our parents or our grandparents used to do don't meet the community standards today. So let's look at that minimum sufficient level of care. What it says is that we need to look at the child's needs. The social standards of today is the parent's behavior within or outside commonly accepted child-rearing practices in our society. So during the first half of the 20th century, kids got hit with belts, not widely considered abusive. Maybe even contemporary families don't find that abusive, but usually using that timeout or a smaller punishment is what's more appropriate. You can use physical discipline on your child, but under law you cannot leave a mark. Okay? My grandmother was good with that wooden spoon. Y'all ever gotten spanked with a wooden? Oh yeah, not pleasant. Yeah. It's widely expected now that children will attend school. It's the law. But you can't homeschool children. Unfortunately, some of these families are calling it homeschooling, but we had one lady that had no curriculum. I mean, it was just, she wasn't teaching her kids, she just didn't want to take her kid to school. And so social standards apply in medical care as well. And then there are community standards. So when an age when a child can be left safely at home. Well, if mom's got 3 kids, she's working 3 jobs, dad's working 2 jobs, and there's nobody to stay home with the kids, we might leave the 6-year-old in charge of the 2-year-old. Well, that's neglectful supervision under the state law. It's what people need to do to get by, though, sometimes, right? So it's very tricky. But minimum sufficient level of care says the child has to be safe. But if they've got food, clothing, and shelter and they're safe, they don't need a summer vacation and college and all these other things to be a happy kid and to be safe. The home needs to be safe, stable, and appropriate. All right? And if parents can do all that, they can meet their child's physical needs, take them to the doctor and do all that stuff. Socially, emotionally, physical, all of that. If they can do that, then they deserve to have their kids back. Poverty is not a reason for children to be removed. It's just not. It's the single biggest risk factor for abuse and neglect, but it is not a causal factor. Lots of people grow up poor and do not get abused by their parents, right? So, questions about minimum sufficient level of care. It's kind of hard to do, and I told a lot of you this story during your interview, but we had a volunteer who had a PhD, came from a good family, was advocating for a little boy who had a developmental delay. He was about 4 or 5 years old. His mom had a serious drug problem. He had been left with and raised by his great-grandparents, who were not very old. You'd be surprised in this day and age who's a great-grandparent. And so he had been left with them a lot, so he's really bonded to them. But he was in a really nice middle-class, upper-middle-class foster home. He had developmentally appropriate toys. He had his own room. He had his own bed. He had all kinds of advantages. And this volunteer could not bring herself to recommend him going back to his great-grandparents. They wanted him. They wanted to adopt him. Mom was out of the picture. He had a bed. He had a couple of toys and a book. But the place was clean. It was safe. Can only be described as a shack. Okay, and I'm just, that's the only way I can describe it, out in the country. But it was safe, it was appropriate, it was very clean, and they were very proud of everything that they had. And this volunteer she said, who's going to help him with his homework? Who's going to help him with his college application? Who's going to do he doesn't have enough to play with. He doesn't have his own room. All those kinds of things. And that's not minimum sufficient level of care. And that's why the rule and the standard is there, so that poverty doesn't keep people away from their children. Does that make more sense to everybody? Okay. Questions about minimum sufficient level of care? No? Okay, good. And it is. For me, anyway, it was probably one of the hardest things to understand. I think we'll have a CASA panel, And one of the volunteers talked about the poverty being the hardest thing for her to handle when she came into CASA, because it was something she'd never experienced. And it's rural poverty, which is really different from urban poverty. And so it's pretty rough. And let me tell you, there is a lot of methamphetamine out there. I always say there's nothing else to do if you don't even have sex and do drugs. There's no movie theater, there's no stores, there's no employment. I mean, nothing. It's pretty desolate out there. Kathy, that's one of Kathy's counties. All right, I'm trying to see how much we've got left. All right, we're good. All right, 4 main duties of a CASA. Right up here: facilitate, advocate, monitor, and investigate. Do y'all need room for the sandwiches? Oh, go ahead. Go right ahead.
You need help.
Oh, yeah. Look, there's Quinn, little baby. She's probably going to sleep through the whole thing and we won't get to play with her. And we also have to wash our hands. Do I what?
Need a tea?
No, thank you. Thanks for asking. Okay, investigate, advocate, facilitate, and monitor. We've talked a lot about the investigative piece, right? Advocacy, we've talked about things like getting Johnny's glasses because he can't see the blackboard. Making sure that judge understands the kids and kids need support. Advocating for the special services the child might need in school. Okay, anybody got a question about advocacy or investigation? Okay, facilitation is keeping everybody in the loop, facilitating that communication. You're going to keep your advocate supervisor in the loop. You're going to make sure you're giving all the people who are entitled, legally entitled to the information. So remember, we're not information givers, we're information gatherers. But if I have a visit and I talk to the child, I talk to the foster parent, and I observe a visitation between mom and dad and the child, I'm going to, all at once, let's say, because sometimes that's possible, I'm going to write that information up in an email and I'm going to shoot it out to all the legal parties, people who have the legal access to that information. Now I have a time and date stamp. I have information to everybody. I'm keeping everybody on the same page. And I want your advocate supervisor to be in on that inclusive email practice as well. Okay. Facilitating can also be facilitating services. Maybe you're the only one that's noticed Johnny's not reading very well. Maybe he came into school really behind, but he hasn't been tested for any kind of accommodations at school. So we're going to do advocacy in the school as well. And then monitoring is monitoring that service plan. Remember we talked about trust but verify? Once every 3 months, we're going to be checking in with the service providers to make sure that mom and dad are doing what they're supposed to do, that the kids therapist is making good reports, you know, those kinds of things. Okay. So questions about 4 main duties. Okay. Now don't get scared when I hand this one out. This is what you're going to be doing once. We can just let everybody pass them back, I think. No, you know if there's not enough at that table. Thanks. It's at this point that we actually do lock the door. Okay. One more. Thank you. All right, here are your responsibilities. You probably can't read this, which is why I gave you a handout. I'll take it. Thank you. Oh, you're not familiar with those? Okay. At least once a month, have a face-to-face, and I put it on here, FTF. That's our acronym for face-to-face visit with each child if they're within a 120-mile radius. That's 120 miles one way. Okay. If it's over 120 miles, you go once every 3 months. Now, if it's Amarillo, Abilene, Laredo, those kinds of things, we have courtesy CASA workers, but you'll want to call, text, FaceTime, whatever it is, and in between there. Okay. And so these are minimum standards. Okay. Minimum expectations. Now this a face-to-face meeting with your CASA supervisor. a face-to-face visit with the parents. If their visitation is supervised, you want to observe a visitation once a month. Oh, I forgot to take the little U's out of here. Once a month, you can have face-to-face phone or email, okay, so it does not have to be face-to-face. Contact with the child therapist, with foster parents or placement, CPS caseworker, and teachers. Only teachers for kids that need special education, okay? So if they're in general education, you talk to the teacher every 3 months. Okay, so turning that over, or I'll flip the slide. Once every 3 months, you have face-to-face phone or email contact with the service providers. That might be a parenting class provider, the therapist. CASA, who stole our name, is the Brazos Valley Council on Alcohol and Substance Abuse, and they're actually going to be here Monday night to talk about substance abuse and services that they provide. They might also have a class like on domestic violence intervention or anger management, and you may talk to them. Additionally, face-to-face phone or email contact with the teachers for kids that have no special education needs. Face-to-face phone or email contact with the attorney ad litem. In addition, you have to come to every permanency conference and meeting regarding your case, and every 3 months you'll be going to court. Now, sometimes in Brazos County, they call what's called a progress hearing. You saw that wasn't on your list of hearings, right? If you can, usually you have a good amount of notice of that, but sometimes not. So if you can come, that's great. If you can't, your supervisor will stand in for you. Questions? That's a lot. It's a lot of work. That's 15 to 20 hours a month in the beginning for sure. 5 to 10 to 15 every month. So it's a big commitment. And that's why I said if you get 3 days, 1 day, 3 days, 3 weeks into training, and you decide this isn't for you, that's okay. We want this to be a good fit for you and for the kids and for us. Okay? Questions about minimum expectations. And keep in mind, this is minimum. So you can visit we don't want to interrupt the family's life all the time, the foster family. But you can call or text your kid more often, things like that. What did you have? Were you going to add? I'm looking to Linda and Nancy to add anything they want to, having been CASA volunteers, or Kathy back there who's been on several.